When it comes to leading meaningful business transformation, what key principles do you think every PM should really embrace?
Sure. Well, you've got the book in front of you, The Impact Engine. And if you it's funny, my version of the book has all of these little places, scribbles all over it, all these things that I want to tell people, talk about. It's scribbles all over the book, right? It's meant to be used as a resource, with you all the time. And it's funny, I would just in Saudi Arabia.
Did you know that project management success goes far beyond completing projects on time, within budget, and to the desired quality? True success is about delivering real value to stakeholders, driving business growth, and creating a long-lasting sense of accomplishment within your team. Yet, achieving this level of impact is no easy feat. It demands a shift in perspective and approach. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with Laura Barnard. Laura is a PMP, founder and chief impact driver of PMO strategies, and an expert in transformative project leadership. We're going to talk about essential principles that can help project managers lead impactful, value-driven projects. We'll also discuss ways to maximize project outcomes and share insights on elevating your project management skills to new heights. And she's so focused on business goals, which I love about this interview. I'm your host, Anthony Fasano, and this is the AEC Project Management Show. All right, now I'd like to welcome my guest onto the show for today. Laura Barnard is a PMP. She's also the founder and chief impact driver of PMO strategies. Laura, welcome to the AEC Project Management Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and to serve your community of impact drivers.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. In fact, I'm excited because a couple months back, Laura sent me a copy of her book, The Impact Engine, and we're going to get into all that today. But just to kind of get us started here, Laura, maybe you could start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and kind of what even led you to founding PMO strategies.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, like many of your listeners, I actually started in more of a technical field. I have a computer science degree from Virginia Tech, go Hokies, and was one of only 4 women in my graduating class. So I I had no idea that I was going to end up in project management, building PMOs, or definitely not starting a company. I had no interest in doing that decades ago. But what happened was, like probably many of your listeners, I was the one who would go, we'd be in a meeting, we'd be trying to solve technical problems. The business people would be there where everyone's in the room and we're getting stuck. And so I was the one that would go up to the whiteboard, grab the whiteboard marker and start figuring out how we were going to solve the problem. Right. And you're smiling because probably resonates with you. Right.
Right.
I think that's part of our DNAs. We're like, all right, enough of this. Let's go figure out how we're going to solve the problem. Right. So
Exactly.
that's what I started doing. And it turns out that I was one of the few people that could translate between the business and the technology people. Right. I could actually do that translation and help people get together and rally behind a mission or focus and solve a problem. Turns out there's a whole job for that called project management. And so like many people that have been doing this for a long time, and this is back in the 90s, I accidentally found myself into project management. And then in 1999, I got the chance to build my first PMO. And I actually didn't even know that's what it was called back then. And, I just knew we had business problems we were trying to solve. We had client engagements that were behind, that were taking too long, costing too much, and a whole bunch of project managers trying to get things done. And they needed somebody to kind of herd the cat herders, right? And so and help make it easier for them to do their jobs. And turns out that's a PMO. So I built my first PMO, and frankly, I had no idea what I was doing. I had to figure out a lot of things out the hard way. I had to make a lot of mistakes. I ended up with a lot of battle scars to prove it. And over the years, after that, I spent about 15 years inside organizations building and running PMOs and transformation teams. And along the way, because I was on the board of PMI chapters, my chapter peer board members would be like, hey, PMOs, can you come talk about that on stage?
Yeah,
I was
you could do that.
terrified. Yeah, no problem. I was terrified. A lot of people don't believe it, but I'm actually an introvert, like Myers-Briggs, right?
I wouldn't have guessed that. But
I know, nobody does. I just got, but see, this is what's possible if you really invest in building strengths where so
Yeah.
that you can, communicate a message, right?
Right.
So
Right.
if I can do it, anyone can do it because I was terrified. I mean, I'm good at getting people to do stuff, but standing up on a stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people is a
Oh
little
gosh. Yeah.
daunting.
That's different.
And it was what happened for me is that it was really all about serving the people that were on that journey, but newer in the process than I was, right? So what would happen is I would start talking about all these things. And I was like, why would anybody listen to me? Of course, everybody knows this. And it turns out that they didn't. And what I now took as common sense and was like, oh, yeah, of course you do it this way, was new to people that were newer in the space. And so I would say to people, no, 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 don't do this instead. This is why. And this is why you're going to save yourself so much headaches and frustration and overwhelm. You got to do this instead. And so I would look at them and I would say, I wish I had me when I was you,
Mm.
right? And it like really, and that's the intro to the book, but that came from me actually saying it to people and be like, gosh, I wish somebody like me would have done this for me when I was in your shoes. And it just kind of stuck. And I realized, you know what? I could actually help more people if I was able to go out and do this on my own as opposed to doing it for like one company at a time, right? Because I was volunteering, I was in the board of PMI chapters, I was doing all of this stuff to help other people, but I felt like I could do more. And that's what we do. So now we have this company, and our whole job and the book that we wrote is all about helping the PMO and project people understand how to accelerate strategy delivery. And from the perspective of someone that's been in their shoes and did it for a long time and has all the battle scars to prove it and is like wanting to make it easier for those that come after me.
Yeah, that's great. And I think most of our listeners, because this is a project management podcast, understand what a
Sure.
PMO is. But if you don't, a project management officer, a PMO, is typically a division or department within an organization that's responsible for all things related to project management or project
Right.
delivery activities,
Right.
taking you through the life cycle. And it's interesting in our industry, in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, I often find that companies will wait actually a little bit too long to develop a PMO. They just have a bunch of project managers in their company. And without the PMO, you don't really have a strategy for projects. You don't have a strategy for training your PMs. So if you're out there thinking about when you should start a PMO in your company, I would probably err on the side of doing it sooner rather than later, even if it's, smaller to begin with. But I think that's a big challenge for AEC firms is that they
Yeah.
wait a little bit too long on that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing is that a lot of people think, oh, I'll get this question all the time. How many projects should we have or how much budget should we be spending or, before we should set up a PMO? And frankly, we have out a lot of the people that are in our mastermind, for example, we have a mastermind for PMO and project people all around the world. And the PMO level, the many of them are like one person PMO. They've just started. They, were asked to come in. They might be the first project manager in their organization, even. And they're like I was, where they're just trying to
Right.
figure it out the hard way. Right. So you don't have to be of a certain size. We've worked with people. We literally worked with a 12-person organization that just
Wow.
dedicated their first project manager to start building PMO capability. Now, they had a bunch of volunteers and stuff as well, but the
Right.
paid staff was 12 people and the CEO. And they went on to be wildly successful, starting with one person who didn't even like have formal project management experience. And I have several stories around that kind of thing in the book. You don't have to be of a certain size. It's about the things you do to help drive those better business outcomes for the organization. That's what really matters. And that function, we have a PMO and we're a small 20-person company, right? So it's about how do you organize the work that is about change, right? So it's not as much, although some PMOs manage, project operational activities like projects, right?
Right.
But it could be a small organization to a large organization. It's about how do we organize the change that people are going through in a way that helps us accelerate getting to the outcomes for the strategy. Like that's the purpose. In large PMOs of hundreds and hundreds of people, it doesn't really matter the shape or size. It's a lot of the same problems and a lot of the same common sense solutions to those problems.
That's a great way to kind of summarize it there.
Sure.
So, Laura, let's talk project management. So, when it comes to leading meaningful business transformation, what key principles do you think every PM should really embrace?
Sure. Well, you've got the book in front of you, The Impact Engine. And if you like, it's funny, is my version of the book has like all of these like little places, like scribbles all over it, all these things that I want to like tell people, talk about. It's like the scribbles all over the book, right? Like it's meant to be used as a, a resource, like with you all the time. And it's funny, I would just in Saudi Arabia, when I was just mentioning to you that I was just in Saudi Arabia, and one of the people that I saw there, she said, I keep this book with me everywhere I go. I pulled it out so I could sign it for her. And she's like, you're like coming from the other side of the world. You are signing my book, right? But
It's great.
chapter 2 in here is all about what we call the impact driver mindset shifts. And in the impact engine system as a whole, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later, the central gear of that system is the mindset. You must have the right mindset, and there's 6 key principles to our mindset shifts that everybody, whether you're, project manager, PMO leader, frankly anybody running and delivering on change must understand these 6 key principles. And they spell the word impact, which is why we call them the impact driver mindset shifts. Instill focus, measure outcomes, perform relentlessly, adapt to thrive, communicate with purpose, and then transform mindset. There are 6 things you must do if you want to accelerate strategy delivery for your organization. And it's a big one that people in the space of business transformation must embrace. So the first one is instilling focus. And we can talk about the others as we go through based on
Sure.
time. But and that one is the way I would think about that one is there's multiple threads to instilling focus, but it's really about it's not you don't want to just throw yourself into managing project tasks, right? Instead, we want to get laser focused on what the organization is really trying to achieve. What happens with a lot of people is that they're spread too thinly. They're trying to do all this operational work and the project work and all these different things coming at them at once. And if everything is important, nothing is important. And so it's about making sure that you get laser focused on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and prioritize your energy and focus to be on the things that are going to drive the biggest business value the fastest. And this isn't just for people on the projects or the project manager. This is often conversations we have to have with the folks in the C-suite, right? Because they're the ones that are like, well, everything's important. We got to get it all done tomorrow. What have you done for me lately, right?
Yeah, no,
And
I
so
mean,
it's
I hear you. I mean, I'm a big 80/20 believer. So for me,
yeah.
it's like find the 20% that are driving everything and put your
Right.
focus on those. So I love the idea of focusing on, and I think really that's a challenge for technical professionals because we tend to have a list of 10 things to do and we just start at the top. But if the most
Yes.
impactful one is at the bottom, we're in trouble, right? So
Right.
I think the ability to identify the drivers and focus on them is really important for a project manager, really for any professional, quite
Right.
frankly. And I think the fact that you have, and we'll go through them as we go through the rest of our
Sure.
conversation, but the fact that you have kind of the 6 of them in that framework, to me, especially working with technical professionals and being an engineer myself, I want
Yeah.
frameworks. I want
Right.
something I can step through when I'm managing my projects, just like a project lifecycle. I want to go, kind of go through it. And so that's really helpful. So
Yep.
Laura, how can project managers cultivate a culture of adaptability within their teams, especially when they're dealing with evolving business priorities? We know projects change every day. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I just want to say, like, as to we set the stage on some of these things, projects don't exist in a vacuum, right? What we really need to do is ask ourselves, what's the real problem here? And when you understand the strategic goals and you can actually solve business problems, not just project problems, then you're aligning the work and the way you think about your work to those big picture outcomes. So that's where the magic starts to happen is when we shift our focus, right? The instill focus, and then make sure that whatever we build and how we build it, we're building it in a way that stays with the business, meaning we call this step is called adapt to thrive. And what that looks like is, in a world where everybody's dealing with a fast pace of change, shifting priorities, things are like, everybody wants everything done yesterday. You cannot get yourself so stuck in your process that you forget the reason you're doing it, right? So, for example, on projects, this is a really tough one for a lot of people. On projects, what happens is everyone gets really focused on the triple constraint, the time, scope, and cost, right?
Right.
And everyone say, okay, I've got to make sure we stay on time, we stay on budget, we stay, within the scope, no changes, no changes, no changes. Say no more. Well, the problem with that is the project manager has no business saying yes or no to anything because they don't own the project, right? It's for a business goal, and there's a business owner, hopefully a sponsor, a product owner, someone that's really engaged, is saying, this is the thing that we need to accomplish and why. So if they come to you and say, hey, we need to make a change, it's not the project manager's job to say, no, you can't have that, because they're trying to protect that triple constraint. It's about adapting so that the project and the organization can thrive and say, yeah, we can do that. And here's what that would take, right? And put the decision back on the business to decide whether or not that change is worth it. They might say it's worth it because if we don't make this change, then there's no point in even going forward because we're not going to achieve the revenue targets or whatever the metrics are they're using to define success, which hopefully is defined clearly in a business case, right?
Right.
So,
You
and
would
then that
hope.
makes it right, and then that makes it easy to say, well, if this is what success looks like and you're requesting a change in order to ensure that success, yes, we can do it. And that means we will need to adjust either, it is still secretly a triple constraint conversation. Well, if we're going to add scope, then we need to adjust the time and the cost and resources, et cetera. But it's not leading with that. It's not driving with, no, 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 you must do it this way. It's saying, I can be flexible, nimble, and adaptive here, but we do have outcomes we're trying to achieve. So let's make sure we don't lose sight of that and we're still going to get to those, but being flexible to the response and the needs of the business and, ensuring that you're keeping things moving in that direction, that focus, right? What are the reason we're doing this anyway? What's the business outcomes we're trying to drive toward?
Yeah, I love that because I think project managers can get caught up in a lot of things and forget that there is an overarching business goal for this project that we're trying to
Right,
strive forward. So I think keeping that in mind and coming back to that often is really important to making sure that you're delivering for the client, for that owner of the project, whoever
right,
that may be, which is really
right.
important. So,
Exactly.
Laura, you work with a lot of teams. What are some common challenges that teams face when implementing transformative strategies, and how can they best address them?
Challenges? Oh, no, there's no challenges. Okay, so there's plenty, but one of the ones that I see that really hits people hard is this, and all of these mindset shifts kind of weave together, right? But one that hits a lot of people hard is kind of losing steam and getting sidetracked by like the shiny distractions, right? So part of this and still focus is what is the business goals you're trying to achieve, but you still need to be flexible in how you get there, whether it's changes like we talked about with Adapt to Thrive, with your methodology, your approach. Well, that weaves in nicely to performing relentlessly. And that's where that comes in because the focus here is on keeping everything moving forward, even if you're only taking small steps. So, any kind of transformation effort is a marathon and a sprint, is the way I like to look at it, right? It's not one or the other, it's
Right.
actually both. So, whether you're using things like adaptive methodologies or like, an agile implementation approach, or maybe you're doing a little bit of agile, a little bit of waterfall, or a little, like we like to say, a water scrum fall, right? Like sometimes you need a little bit of
A little
everything.
bit of everything.
Whatever
Yeah.
your method or approach is to getting the problem solved, that you're doing it with focus on acceleration. We call it performing relentlessly. Don't get so caught up in perfecting your process and forgetting that the reason you're there is to get to those business outcomes. And that means you keep everyone on the team committed to that goal, that why, the reason you're doing it, and you stay, I like to say, relentlessly clear on the outcomes you're driving by telling people, okay, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. How do we get there quickly? Let's not waste tons and tons of time on documentation nobody's going to read. I'm not saying don't do documentation. I'm saying your business case needs to answer three things and doesn't need to be 45 pages. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what does success look like? Right. So, like, let's look at ways that we can streamline our process, streamline how we're doing what we're doing, optimize instead of always looking at the answer as more. right? A lot of times, like in the PMO space, this happens all the time. The executives complain, oh, projects are taking too long and costing too much. So the PMO starts throwing all of these templates, tools, and process and saying, this will fix it, right? And what they've ended up doing is slowing things down instead of speeding them up. So relentless performance is all about what are the things we need, and only do those things in order to drive success for this project. If you have a 3-month project, you probably don't need 45 templates, right?
Yeah.
Or 642 meetings, right, to get that project finished. Let's have the right people and the right conversations and be smart about what we're doing, in what order, and what we need to move faster instead of slower. But that also means keeping people focused, right? And keeping
Yeah.
them, not having your subject matter experts spread across 82 projects and then wondering why none of them are moving. You've got to know who your constraints are and build your operating model around making sure that those constraints have time to actually do work instead of spend all of their time in meetings or responding to the squeaky wheel that some of these project managers listening might be. I totally get it,
Right.
right? But if your subject matter experts are constantly giving you status updates or having to jump all over the place from task to task or project to project because everyone's complaining that they're not getting what they need, that task switching is degrading the ability for that person to get their work done. So relentless performance aligned with focus and being flexible is all about making sure that you create space for the people that need to do the work to actually get that work done.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of kind of keeping it simple to some degree. Like, I was just doing a training today for a company, project management training. We're doing scheduling. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
Listen, understand the basics of scheduling, dependency,
Mm-hmm.
iterations, etc. If you start to create this software that's too complicated, they're not going to use it, right? So it's
Right.
like there's got to be a good in between. Like, I want to do the job effectively and push the project forward, but if I start to go down rabbit holes with certain technologies or trying to do something and it becomes
Mm-hmm.
confusing, you're just not going to do it anymore. So
Right.
I think like there's this happy medium in project management where you definitely want to do a great job and deliver value. But like you're saying, it doesn't mean you got to write a 45-page report every time. So
Right.
there's got to be kind of that happy medium. And it's funny too. I think this applies in, all aspects of our lives. In fact, my wife and I are doing a project at home where we're redesigning a couple of rooms and we're trying to pick the furniture as like a starting point. And I told my wife, I was like, it's like this thing is like if you don't have enough information, that's fine. You need to get information, get feedback from someone, ask them for opinions, read the reviews. Then you get into this area where you have enough information and you have to make a decision. Otherwise, if you keep getting more advice and more feedback, you start to go backwards again and then you don't make a decision. So it's like project management. Like, as a PM, at some point you got to make a decision and move the project forward, because you could keep asking people questions forever, but
Right.
you don't have unlimited budget and you don't have unlimited schedule. So I think that's
Right.
really one of the arts of project management, is knowing when to push things to the next step. And yes, have enough information, get perspectives from people, but then move forward, because otherwise you can get stuck somewhere and you're just going to burn through your budget and your schedule, and you're going to look up and say, now we've got a real problem.
100%. Absolutely.
So, Laura, communication is obviously a make or break factor in successful
Right.
transformations. What strategies can project managers use to ensure that they're effectively communicating project value across the organization?
Right, absolutely. And we were kind of starting to get to it with those big, heavy reports, right? Because one of the mindset shifts that all what we call impact drivers must make is about not just communication for like getting information out there or like even worse, data. We throw a lot of data at something or someone and then wonder why decisions aren't getting made. So it's all about
Right.
communicating with purpose, right? It's not just data, nor is it like with all the, let's get all this data together on our project and all this information, and because we can measure it, we do. So we have 642 metrics for every project and nobody's looking at that anyway. And when you try and turn that into information so that people can make decisions, okay, now maybe you're down to 30 metrics, but you're still putting, a 40-page report in front of your executives. And then you're getting annoyed when they're stuck down on the bottom of page 16 on some point that's not even relevant to the decisions you need to make that day.
Right.
Right. And they complain, well, now we got to have 3 more meetings to talk about the meetings, to then have more data, to then, try and get more decisions. And by the way, all this time is escaping us on the project, right? So you can see how these are starting to weave together, right? We've got to, we've got to make sure we're focused. We got to make sure that we are performing relentlessly. And that weaves into communication. How do we make sure that every message is framed in terms of the audience, what they need to do as an outcome of that conversation? Is it, all communications should be around driving actions and decisions, right? We don't need to have, we've gone into organizations where there were 100 people on a daily status call for a project. And I was like, do you know how many thousands of dollars you're spending having all of these people in a conversation where they're not, first of all, they're only half listening anyway, which means they're task switching, which means everything else they're doing is suffering as well. And two, they're not even involved in the decision-making process. You can send out a quick one-page report that says, here's where things are, right? Or have a simple status reporting mechanism, and then use meetings and and emails and every way that we're communicating with people to drive actions and progress, that relentless performance and decision making. I mean, how many emails have you gotten that say FYI, and then you're having to like scroll through the email to figure out what the heck's going on? Don't ever do that to anybody.
Right.
That's because I ignore those, right? I'm like,
Right.
if it's important, you're going to tell me. And most executives to do as well, by the way, because the problem is they have to make 100 decisions a day before lunch, right? They have so many decisions that they need to make, and they're already suffering from decision fatigue. So if you have a situation where everybody's already struggling and suffering, and you're trying to get decisions from them, the more information you put in front of them, the harder it's going to be for them to do so.
Yeah.
So we really have to say, you know what, let's just simplify, streamline that relentless performance, and make sure that we're answering the question, how does this help people do their job better? How do we know the needle is moving for the organization, and make sure that everyone's speaking the same language about what the project's about, why they're doing it, what success looks like, how they know they're going to be successful, and that gets woven into every conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I love having like a framework of questions that can recalibrate you or keep you on track when you start to get off track, especially in project management, because you can get off track pretty easily
Oh,
on our types of
yes, you
projects.
can.
So how can project managers in architecture and engineering encourage their teams to really focus on delivering real business value beyond like the timeline and budgets like you talked about before, which is
Yeah.
mostly what people refer to?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so here's the thing, and I totally get it. I love writing things down on a list just to check them off, right? Like, so I totally get that. I like to say, okay, here's all the things, like we're talking about, the details of the outputs of the things we're trying to create. Let me get my list of things I have to do and let me get those things done. But the problem is if you don't stay focused on that bigger picture result, then you can be doing all the wrong things in the wrong order, things that probably shouldn't be done anyway, et cetera. So this is where measure outcomes comes into play. It's not about perfecting our deliverables and making sure that every box is checked and that everything is done. Sometimes some of those things probably shouldn't have been done in the first place. And if you were clear on what the business outcome, that success criteria look like, you may make different decisions about what you're doing and what should maybe not even be done at all. So what we like to say is, listen, it's you want to know, are you on time? Are you within budget? Are you managing your resources effectively? Is it the right scope, et cetera? Got it. But none of that tells you whether or not the business goals are going to be achieved. Even in value management that a lot of people use, the
Yeah.
EVM,
Yep.
that V stands for value. But you know what EVM does not measure? Value. It only measures how good you are at predicting the timeline and the
Right.
budget.
Yep.
It doesn't actually say if any of those outputs you created achieved the business outcomes or are set up to achieve the business outcomes that the project was originally intended to deliver. And so you can have a very pretty website that is exactly what the customer was looking for example, but from a look and feel perspective, from a deliverables perspective. But if it's not set up in a way that's usable, nobody's going to use it. right? So from an engineering perspective, we get so caught up in all the cool things we want to do, especially in tech, right? But, but in all fields of engineering, all the things we want to do, we get really, really caught up. And these are all the cool, fun things we want to do. But if it's not going to achieve the business goal, we shouldn't be doing them in the first place. So we must make sure that not just the customer or the sponsor, the key stakeholder understands what success looks like. Everybody needs to be saying, did we or are we going to deliver something that actually matters to the business? And when your team sees that and knows that, they will make different decisions about what to do. They'll make different recommendations on how to accelerate getting to those outcomes, but only if they're clear on what that success looks like. And I think that's a big problem we have in the project space, is that traditional project management training is so focused on perfecting outputs, not driving better business outcomes.
Yeah, and I would say for those PMs out there thinking about how can I do this effectively, a couple tips I can give you is have the business goal as a major part of your kickoff meeting
Yes.
conversation, right from the beginning of the project. And then every time you have a project update meeting, I would at least touch on it, maybe even open up the meeting with it, because I feel like it's something you need to keep reinforcing to your team members, or else just like PMs, they're going to get lost in the world of project management and they're going to forget about the business goals. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. So Laura, just we've talked a little bit about the impact engine. You took us through what those letters stand for, but give us an overview of the impact engine and how it supports teams in consistently delivering strategic business results as we're discussing here.
Sure. Yeah. So the impact driver mindset is that central gear in our overall impact engine system, which is what the whole book is about. So the impact engine system is a frame. So it's a framework within a framework, right? So you have the mindset shifts, which are the 6 things that we talked about. And I think we've talked about almost all of them. And then around that is what we call a continuous value delivery model, which is an iterative approach to building capability within an organization, whether you do it in the context of setting up a project management office or program or portfolio management office, a business transformation office, a customer facing client delivery office, whatever you call that function, that department, that team in an organization that's responsible for ensuring that not just one project gets delivered well, but that all of the projects get delivered well in a way that achieves those business outcomes. That's what the full impact engine system is about. And like I said, it's on that gear, that central gear that turns the engine of, those mindset shifts. But it's about a step-by-step framework that starts with assess and then define, plan, deliver, and importantly, like you're saying about consistently delivering strategic business results, evolve. So this is a framework of figuring out what are the business problems in your organization that you must solve, assess, and that's not based on what the medicine you think they need to take, but instead what they actually want solved. That's one of the secrets, is getting to the core of what your subject matter experts, your stakeholders, your business leaders, what they care about and what the problems they're looking to solve. They're not experts in project management necessarily or in what a delivery team should do, but they are experts in their own pain. So if you can get them talking about that, you can lean back into that when you bring them on this journey with you to say, hey, remember that problem you had? Communicating with
Yep.
purpose, right? Remember that problem you had, right? I've got a solution for you, which is what you do in the define stage. But in the define stage, you don't just want to focus on putting solutions based on the symptoms, right? That's what a lot of people
Right.
do. They say projects are taking too long and costing too much. Therefore, I need to throw a bunch of templates, tools, and process. That'll make us better, right? And instead, they slow things down, the opposite of performing relentlessly, instead of speeding them up. So what we teach is to get to the root cause of those pain points. And when you do, and you one, can fix fewer things, and
Right.
two, you create this positive ripple effect in the organization by fixing things where they're actually starting, which is usually at the beginning of the strategy development process, not prioritizing, not getting clear on what success looks like, all of those kinds of things that usually are before the project manager's even assigned, right? Those are the things you got to fix first. Then you can actually make sure the projects are set up for success before they ever start. So instead of playing whack-a-mole with a bunch of symptoms,
Yeah.
you have fewer things to fix, but they're root causes, right? So then you define the right solutions to those problems, and then you build an iterative value delivery model framework with like the way you plan rolling out services and capabilities. So if your problem is that projects are taking too long, costing too much, and the root cause is actually not about not having enough templates or process or training for project people. Yes, you need that, but maybe not yet. First, let's get clear on, we have 65 projects we need to do. How
Yeah.
about we prioritize them so that we're not starting everything at once? Because when you start everything at once, you end up with those subject matter experts spread across 16 different projects. And who's getting anything done with 1/16th of a critical resource, right? So we have to make sure we get to those problems, solve those in the right order, which is when you build your plan in the planning stage. And then when you deliver, going back to performing relentlessly, you're delivering constant value. So instead of waiting until you have 16 different things that you can deliver to your customers, you do it in an iterative approach. Fix one problem, let the positive ripple effect of that happen, and that starts driving the requirements for the next problem you need to solve, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And people often say, well, once I fix one thing, another problem appears. And I say, you're welcome. You are gainfully employed, right? Because you have plenty of other things to fix, but you've built trust and credibility with your stakeholders. So they're begging you to help them. So instead of creating a push where you're like, you need me to come in and fix things for you, you create a pull because like, I don't know what you do, but you do the magic to solve the things I need. You're now my trusted advisor, my partner in this journey, and helping me get this strategy delivered. So you get a seat at the table. You're actually solving the right problems, and you're doing it in a way that has them begging for more, which is huge. And then evolve. And so that's deliver. And then evolve, you go find that next business problem you need to solve and you go fix that next. But you're doing it in a way that has you adapting to thrive, right? You see how all
Yeah.
the mindset shifts weave in with the impact engine system because you're doing the way you do what you do is these mindset shifts. And when you do all of this in this way, you get to that last step in the impact driver framework, which is transform mindset. You transform not the mindset of others, but the way you show up and deliver for the organization. And that begs them to pull the chair out for you, to give you a seat at the table. They're like, we need you here
Yeah.
because we
Right.
can't move forward without you, right? That's what you want, is to become what we call the strategy navigator for the organization. You do that by weaving in all of these techniques together, these frameworks and this approach to be nimble, flexible, adaptive, business focused, outcome driven, and solving the problems that your business leaders really want you to solve instead of focusing on what you think they need.
Yeah, no, it's great. And again, Slower's book, The Impact Engine, what I love about the Impact Engine system, like you said, is it drives consistency. We
Yeah,
work with tons of organizations and everyone's doing project management differently across their organization, which is not a good thing
right,
when you're trying to put out a
right.
consistent high quality product, plans, specifications, engineering projects, etc. So having these frameworks and this system that you kind of just walked us through here today really can help people to do that and firms to do that more consistently. And so, Laura, one last question I have for you is what final advice can you share with project managers on empowering their teams to drive meaningful impact and stay focused? Because to me, that's a huge challenge.
Absolutely. Well, I think part of the reason that project teams struggle is that they feel like, and I ask this all the time when I go speak on stages, I'm like, how many of you think that the people in your organization are resistant to change? Every hand goes up, right?
Right.
Everyone's like, everyone in my organization. And I say, okay, well, put your hand down only if you've ever met anyone that has gotten married, right? Or on purpose,
Right.
or had children on purpose,
Right.
or, changed jobs, or tried a new restaurant, or took a different route to work, or, started a new hobby. People do change to themselves all the time. And
Yeah.
so the challenge we have is with project people, especially, is that we're the enforcers of change. We're the bringers of change to an organization. And many times what happens is we think the people around us are resistant to change, but that's not it at all, as is evidenced by looking around, right? People, even in your organization, are not resistant to change. They're resistant to having change done to them. So the
Right.
secret to success is understanding that you must shift the way you think about the people you're engaging with and how you're engaging with them. And if you really want to empower your teams, you need them to understand what you're trying to do and what's the with them, what's in it for me,
Right.
for them, right?
That's key.
And
Yeah.
and then use that communicating with purpose to go back and say, hey, remember that pain I talked to you about? Telling them in their words, we've got a solution for that. Would you like help with that? They say, heck yeah, you can solve my pain point, not shove a bunch of process at me. I'm in. And then you show them the outcome, not the outputs, not the deliverables, but what's the business outcome you're going to drive, the impact that'll have on the organization, and how you'll know you're successful. right? So if you weave all of these things together and then bring people with you through this change process, doing change with them and through them instead of to them, you will see that you're able to actually accelerate getting the results in a meaningful way, get everyone focused because you're talking their language, you're
Right.
solving the problems they care about, or you're giving them a way to align with those business goals. And then you're creating that drive, that faster acceleration to get into the results because everyone knows why they're there, what their goals are, and what success looks like. And they want to be a part of that. People want to be successful. They just don't want it shoved at them there or like being told what to do. They want to be masters of their destiny and a part of doing something meaningful with their day. And so that's the opportunity that project people really have.
It's all great stuff. The book is The Impact Engine, Accelerating Strategy Delivery for PMO and Transformational Leaders. Laura Barnard is the author. She's also the founder of PMO Strategies, and you can connect with her absolutely on LinkedIn. And also you could check out her website at pmostrategies.com. Laura, I want to just thank you so much for just sharing. This is so important in the world of engineering. Getting that PMO going within organizations is critical, and a lot of firms kind of lag behind doing it or just aren't effective in the way they do it. So I want to thank you for coming on the AEC Project Management Podcast and helping them with that.
Absolutely. And a huge thanks to you, Anthony, but also to your impact drivers out there. They're doing the hard work and they're the ones that are making a big difference in the world. And I know firsthand that that work is not easy. So that's why I'm on this journey with them is I wish they had what I now know. And I want to help them put that common sense into common practice so they can accelerate strategy delivery.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Laura.
Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Laura. She's awesome. Her book, The Impact Engine, is awesome. And if you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better project managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.